Welcome to the show. Today, you and I are going to be discussing the big 3 F words of travel. First up is going to be fear, one of my biggest challenges. Now, we all have our fears, but mine seem to tag along with me whenever I travel, even though I absolutely love travelling. Do you ever feel like you're suddenly out of your comfort zone, relying on people that you don't know or trust, who might not even speak your language? That's where my fear kicks in, and trust issues really start to bubble up. My next one is frustration. Let's be real. Things don't always go smoothly on holiday. They don't always go smoothly in real life either, do they? But when you're on holiday, trying to get things right, and nothing seems to work, frustration can hit hard. And finally, fun. The ultimate goal of any trip, isn't it? We all expect to have an amazing time, but let's face it, sometimes things just don't go as planned. And the trick is managing those moments and still finding a way to enjoy yourself. So stick around today and let's chat about how these 3 Fs, fear, frustration, and fun, show up when we travel. I have a feeling that you're really going to be able to relate to this. I'm Kate Mason, and welcome to Parenting and Personalities. This is the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. So let's look at the things that you and I might fear and the frustrations that happen when you're on holiday and when things don't run according to plan. Are you still having fun? Let's begin by looking at my personality type and how it affects the way I holiday. My MBTI personality type is ESFP. I'm an extrovert, and when I go on holiday, I love doing a lot of different things. Meeting people, travelling with family and friends, getting out in the world. Quiet, isolated, peaceful breaks are not for me. I'm a sensing type, so most of the time I plan my holidays, it tends to be fairly detailed and probably boring to some, and not really exotic or different. I use my feeling preference first, so I'll try to take into consideration all the other things that people want on their holiday with me. Now, I do this because a lot of the time, when other people get what they want, and I'm able to be with them, I feel really happy. As a perceiving type, I go with the flow, really do not love planning, especially things in advance. Now, my sanguine temperament, which are my behaviours, align with my type. Being with people and enjoying good things in life and just having fun are the most important thing to me. Does any of this resonate with you? If not, do you know anyone like me? As someone who loves travelling, I still have many fears and frustrations in my endeavours to have fun. So let me start with my first frustration. Planning and organising. I hate planning. It's boring, and my perceiving preference makes it quite stressful for me to schedule, organise, and make decisions. Does planning and organising come easily for you, or are you feeling my pain? My husband Paul is bossy. I mean, an amazing delegator. When it's time to go on holidays, of which we've had many, and we're very fortunate, he handballs it to me and says, "You organise it, Kate." Excellent. Now, I only do it because I love going away. Who wouldn't? Don't you? No cooking, cleaning, dishes, making beds, or being locked into that boring routine of daily life. Now, that's a holiday for me. Sadly, when going on holiday, there's a certain amount of planning in advance that must be done. There's a need to follow up on everything. Remember when to pay, who to pay, and how to work out what to do. When our children were little, I had to organise absolutely everything when we went away. And as you would know, it's a logistical nightmare. But in recent years, as we're travelling as a family with adults, the great part is they could do some of the organising too. They take over some tasks that usually stress me out, which is amazing. Sure, you're with a group of grown-ups who have their own expectations and ideas about a holiday, but it's fantastic when everyone pitches in. When I start planning a holiday, I usually don't do it too far in advance, unless there's an irresistible airfare deal for the family, of course. My accommodation and activity plans are often very last minute. If I miss out on something, I just think, well, it wasn't really meant to be, was it? I've got a wonderful travel agent who's an ENFP, So she's an intuitive, and she adds a bunch of interesting and unique things to my holiday plans. She's also a last-minute person like me. Now, for those more structured planning types who come along on my trips, this can sometimes be a bit stressful. I remember one time many years ago, we were boarding our flight to Europe. My son Jack, who was about 19 at the time, asked, "Mum, where are we going to stay in Paris?" I replied, "I don't know. Nikki's booking it right now." The look on his face was priceless. He couldn't believe I hadn't already sorted that out. Can you relate to his reaction, or do you agree with me? See, my philosophy is there are plenty of hotels in Paris, so if we don't get the one we wanted, we'll find another. Now that I have structured, organised adult personalities involved in the trip, I know I have to keep everyone in the loop about our travel dates and meticulously plan each detail for each location. I really want everything to be spot on. Do you know why? Because I'm in control and they're not. I'm frustrated because I have to plan, and the others are frustrated because they can't plan. I'm fearful about making a mistake, and they're fearful about me making a mistake. But I must admit, I like the control, if not the planning. Really? Don't we all love being in control? Overall, however, when we go away, we all just really want to have fun. That's my favourite word, don't we? Therefore, we persevere through these emotions of frustration and make sure we find every ounce of enjoyment we can along the way. Now, on our most recent trip, I think I did a good job. Have you ever noticed the differences in personalities when organising trips with family or friends? Are you the organised one trying to work with people like me? Or do you prefer everyone to follow your lead? Or maybe you sit back in resentment while others make decisions for you. There's so much to consider. There is more. Let me tell you about more of my travel fears and how they rear their ugly heads when I'm on the move. What you realise in tackling them head on is it's actually the only way to keep the good times rolling. And we never really know what's around the corner in life, do we? When circumstances change and we face frustrating times on our trip, often my fears didn't come true, or they weren't as scary as I'd imagined. Have you ever had this happen to you? What are your holiday fears? Let's start with one of my biggest ones, flying. Now, many years ago, in order to address this fear, I signed up for a course in aviation, where we sat down with the pilots and engineers and dissected every sound and bump on that plane. Believe me, knowledge really is power when you're up in the clouds. Turns out, those engine noises, just part of cruise control, not a cause for a panic attack. And here's a tip for you. I discovered that I was not alone in this fear game. This course showed me there are many people out there with even bigger fears than mine. Some people are terrified of being locked inside the aeroplane, or they always stayed on the ground floor of a hotel in case of fire. This helped me see my fear in perspective. In fact, it made me feel quite normal. Having kids helped too. Their well-being became my focus during flights, and it made my own fears less significant. Still, every time I board a plane, I say a little prayer to the universe. I know that if something were to happen, it's actually out of my control. Once I travelled with a friend who reassured me by saying, "Don't worry, Kate, I've got a long lifeline on my palm, so if the plane goes down, it won't be with me." Excellent. But of course, I can't always fly with her. But it was a comforting thought nonetheless. So I make sure that my airlines are reputable, my aircraft is as large as possible, in order to feel some level of confidence. What do you do to relieve your fear of flying if you have one? Now, if flying is my number one fear, my number two has to be getting into a taxi. Seriously, why do we put so much effort into driving carefully, wearing seatbelts, and making sure our kids are all buckled up, only to hop into a cab with a driver who seems more concerned about getting his next fare than our safety? My husband and I were in Rome, and our cab driver was literally texting with his phone up to his face while driving. Terrifying, right? And there we were in Chicago once, riding in a cab, when suddenly it starts veering towards a concrete wall. My husband Paul yells, "What are you doing?" The driver quickly straightens out and without missing a beat says, "Oh, I fell asleep." Seriously, he nearly killed all of us, and he still wanted a tip at the end of the ride. You can imagine what kind of tip we gave him. And then there was a time in Thailand where a driver squeezed 7 of us into a 4-seater car and decided that a 2-lane freeway needed a 3rd lane just for him. I was honestly shaking like a leaf when I got out of that car. So yes, fear. It's real, it's varied, and it literally is part of life's wild ride. But facing it head on, that's where the real adventure begins. If I want to travel, unfortunately, I have to suck it up and do a lot of things that I'm fearful and uncomfortable with. In my holiday planning, my fear of taxis surface every time, and I have to work out ways to reduce this. We were flying into New York to start our holiday, and travelling from the airport to the city is a set fare for New York taxi drivers, and their goal is to get you there as fast as possible. Now, we've had some pretty stressful rides in the past. So in my planning, I ensured that there was a private transfer that would deliver us from the airport to our hotel. As I got off the plane in New York, I was so relaxed and happy because I'm prepared for that private driver. Then all of a sudden, he's not there. I couldn't contact him. Now, I was feeling a bit panicked and very frustrated because I wanted to show everyone that I was really organised. So without anyone looking, I frantically rechecked my emails just to make sure I did have the details right, as I am known for missing many dates and times. I also knew I was travelling with several choleric temperaments who tend to get impatient if plans go wrong or they have to wait too long. Now, to give them all credit, they bit their tongues, stood aside as I tried to show them a good example of self-regulation when frustrated. So I said to them, all right, now let's just stay calm, and I tried to call the driver. No answer. I called the car company that the driver belonged to. No answer. We spoke to people at the airport who also rang the car company for us. No answer. We all checked the car park several times with the help of these people. And then we were out of options and now honestly frustrated. So I handed the reins to my choleric family and they jumped into action right away. They're like, okay, we've done all of that stuff. Let's get moving. We've wasted enough time hanging around and your ride is definitely not happening. Next thing you know, they've hailed 2 yellow cabs and got us into the city. Honestly, I am really grateful for the people who pushed me out of my comfort zone. We hopped into those dreaded yellow cabs, and believe it or not, the drivers were actually great. They got us into Manhattan in one piece, and I was so relieved. Fear conquered. Do you like catching cabs? Allowing someone else to take control? Now, I'd organised for us to catch a Red Sox game in Boston. We'd been to one before as a family, but Christina and Sam hadn't seen a game yet, so we thought, why not? We walked over in the late afternoon and the weather was absolutely perfect. The stadium was packed and buzzing with excitement. We grabbed souvenirs, took the obligatory photos, and all sat down with a big bag of fries, ready for the game. The players came out and the game starts. And then, just like that, the weather takes a turn and the rain starts pelting down. After 15 minutes of sitting in torrential rain, hoping the game might go on, they roll out that big cover and announce the game is now cancelled. Really? There goes our money on the tickets, and the next game they offer us is going to be next month, when we're already home. Frustrated, we left the stadium, surrounded by people running around looking for cabs or shelter. By the time we got to the end of the street, we were completely soaked. But honestly, our frustration faded pretty quickly as the need to get out of the rain took over. Our hotel was only a 10 to 15 minute walk away, and it was just Cassie, Sam, Paul and myself, because Christina and Jack had gone on a graveyard tour that night. Not exactly the best night to be out with the ghosts, right? So there we were, walking in the rain, not much shelter around, and I guess we're all a bit reluctant to catch a cab in such dismal weather. Fear is such a negative emotion, isn't it? I said to everyone, hey, it's just water. We'll get back and we'll just dry out. Then out of nowhere, thunder crashes and lightning strikes nearby. Oh my goodness, how many fears do I have? Lightning is definitely one of my biggest. So we took shelter under a bridge, and I'm like, nah, we're here for the rest of the storm because there's no way I'm moving. Thank goodness for my choleric child and her partner who said, we're just going to get an Uber. I'm so thankful for the youth of today. At 62, I'm not exactly used to getting Ubers all the time. And By the way, they can be just as bad as taxis. But within 10 minutes, a Porsche Uber picked us up. How lucky was I? This guy had just finished playing basketball, switched on his Uber app, and we were his first ride for the night. I sat in that Uber, safe and secure, feeling really comfortable that this guy wasn't about to crash his Porsche in the pouring rain. Back in our hotel, it was the best feeling to be warm and safe, and I was so glad that that decision had been made for me. In retrospect, it was so much fun, even if missing the game was frustrating and disappointing. We also went to Vegas, and one of the big highlights was a helicopter ride into the Grand Canyon. We were going to land, have some champagne and snacks, and then fly over the Grand Canyon for an hour and a half. Everyone was really looking forward to it. Well, except maybe Cassie and me. It was one of the highlights of the trip, and I was pretty proud of myself for planning it all out and for having it go smoothly. But here's one thing. I've done this trip before, and I'm really scared of helicopters. Last time we were in Vegas, Cassie and I wanted to shop, while Paul and Jack were all about the helicopter ride. I remember sitting down with Cassie and saying, you know what, if anything happens to Dad and Jack, we're actually not going to enjoy shopping anyway. We're going to be organising funerals and dealing with that. So let's just go with them. If we're going to go down, we may as well all go down together. I know, very melodramatic and maybe a bit crazy, but that's how my mind was working. And even though it was actually a wonderful experience and I loved it the first time, I wasn't really keen on doing it again. It wasn't exactly the top of my list. I'd already checked that one off the bucket list. So this time, I was here taking it for the team. But as an adult, you know when you're on holiday with your kids or even friends, sometimes you've just got to bite the bullet and go along with the plan. It might not be something you love, or it might even be something you're totally scared of, but it usually turns out okay. And hey, sometimes facing those fears can be a good thing. But I'm not saying you have to face every single fear. Sometimes it's perfectly okay to be scared of something and decide not to do it. We've all got our limits, right? So there we are on the day of our helicopter trip in Vegas. It was the afternoon and the temperature had hit a scorching 45 degrees. They just announced that it was going to be one of the hottest days in Vegas history. Naturally, my mind started racing, thinking about all the ways that this could go wrong. I've heard about trips being cancelled because the heat could cause the fuel to evaporate. Not sure how true that is, but hey, they definitely didn't fly that day. So I'm sitting there thinking, why haven't they called this off? It's boiling out there. So I try to calm myself. They know what they're doing. They've got it under control. So we hop on a bus to get to the helicopter. And guess what? The air conditioning's broken down. Just our luck, right? It was the hottest we have ever been, and we were practically fainting by the time we got there. We finally arrive at the helicopter depot, and the guy comes out and says, sorry, I've got some bad news. You won't be able to land in the Grand Canyon today. The air's too heavy. If you land, you won't take off again. But we can still fly you over the canyon for 60 to 90 minutes at a different cost. Well, for me, that was it. I'm out. If we couldn't land, that was something off, and I didn't want to push my luck. But here's the thing. I'm travelling with adults now, not little kids, and it's their decision as to whether they want to go or not. I can't let my fears influence them. They're logical grown-ups after all. Cassie was with me in this, since she'd done it before and she wasn't too keen on helicopters either. But the others, they were still in the game for the flight. So we sit there, my heart's pounding, thinking, what if something happens? But they're all excited and ready to go. And then the moment of relief. I hate to admit it, and I'm really sorry for my family. But I was thrilled when the guy came back and said, it's just hit 52 degrees in Death Valley. We're cancelling the whole trip. Yes! I mean, who wants to be in a helicopter when it's 52 degrees in a place called Death Valley? Not me, that's for sure. The others were disappointed, of course, and I did feel bad for them. It would have been an amazing experience under the right conditions. But they handled it well, knowing there's nothing more they could do. We talked about it afterwards, and hopefully one day they'll get to take that trip. But deep down, I have to admit, I was relieved. Sometimes when your fears are taken out of your hands, there is a huge sense of relief. Now, since we ended up saving some money, I still wanted to make sure everyone had fun. After all, fun's my middle name. So we headed back to Vegas. Christina and Jack caught a show, Cassie went off on a shopping spree, and we sat down to an amazing meal. We just enjoyed being together. And honestly, it was a relief the decision had been taken out of our hands. We're all safe and sound and still having a great time. So my take on my trip with my family and their partners. Here's the thing. When I'm left in charge of planning a trip, it's pretty much guaranteed that things won't go according to plan. Sometimes it's because of Nikki, my travel agent, or myself, and we've forgotten to organise a detail. And at other times, life just throws us a curveball. You know how it goes. Stuff happens, and plans change within a blink of an eye. The funny part about travelling with adult kids is they tend to take over when they see me moving a bit too slowly. They're quick to grab tickets, organise Ubers, and figure out the day's itinerary. And honestly, it's fantastic. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't in charge of everything. It was pure heaven. But as Cassie reminded me, there is method to their madness. She said, "You know why we're doing this, right? Because if we're indispensable, you'll have to keep taking us on trips." Clever, hey? Always knew there was a little something extra behind that help. So if you're planning a trip, whether it's with adults or young kids, remember that fear is natural. If you're a perceiving type like me, you know the drill. Plan, 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 and if it all falls apart, just shrug and say, "This is who I am." And if you're a judging type, realize that no matter how much you do plan, sometimes things just don't work out. And it's not your fault. Life happens. For my choleric friends who get impatient and frustrated when plans change, remember the sooner you shift from anger to planning the next move, the sooner you'll be back on track for a great trip. And before we wrap up things today, just remember, whether you're jet-setting across the globe or exploring close to home, travel's all about those mix of fear, some frustration, and hopefully loads of fun. It's how we make those unforgettable memories that will stick with us forever. Thank you for listening to Parenting and Personalities. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a rating and a review that would help others learn about this podcast. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, you'll find my book, Who Is This Monster or Treasure in My House, on Booktopia or Amazon. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Stories and Strategies, and we'll see you next time.